Back when Adult Swim still aired anime, I stayed up late one night intending to watch my favorite shows, when instead something else aired. A film that literally starts off with a bang, and then immediately drops you into the post-apocalyptic city of Neo Tokyo. This was a movie like nothing I'd ever seen before, that just screamed, "This is anime," and one that would usher in a new wave of anime fans throughout the West. This film was the masterpiece Akira. Hey guys, I'm Mike and welcome back to the Lions Lounge. Now chances are, even if you're not a big anime fan, you've at least heard of Akira. The film was initially released in Japan in 1988, coming to America the year after, where it exploded in popularity. It was gritty, it was raw, and it was beautiful. No other anime up to this point had had such a big impact on the US, and it's well deserved. See, most anime have 2 to 12 distinct frames per second, but Akira was the first to have 24 distinct frames, which shows. Just look at how the characters move and interact. It's really incredible, and its budget of 700 million yen, roughly 5.5 million USD, spoke to that, at the time being the most expensive anime film. The movie itself takes place in 2019, after an explosion wiped out Tokyo over 30 years prior. Tokyo is then rebuilt as Neo Tokyo, a dystopian landscape full of corrupt politicians, gangs, and protests. A setting that still feels incredibly relevant today. We follow our protagonist, Kaneda, a high school punk who leads a bike gang with his childhood friend, Tetsuo, when one day they come into contact with a strange boy, Takashi, the result of which causes Tetsuo to be captured by the military, as this encounter has awakened latent psychic powers within him. Powers the military hopes to understand in the hopes of preventing another catastrophe from occurring. And this is where I want to quickly bring up the relationship between the film and the manga. See, both are by Katsuhiro Otomo. As I said earlier, the former was released in 1988, but the latter between 1982 and 1990, meaning the movie has some differences from the manga, but I wouldn't necessarily call it inferior. The main deviation I want to call out though is the role of Akira. And I'm going to get into some spoilers here, so if you haven't seen the film or read the manga and you want to avoid them, skip to the timecode below. In the film, Akira is basically already dead, his body having been divided into canisters and stored underground. But in the manga, he's very much alive and is held up as a god by a resistance group after he's freed and inadvertently triggers another explosion. Because of the manga's length, it definitely does a better job of exploring Akira as a character compared to the movie. In both mediums though, the relationship between Kaneda and Tetsuo is expanded upon and is the primary conflict. Tetsuo is clearly jealous of Kaneda's strong personality and feels inferior, as Kaneda always seems to come to his rescue, who by the way is shown to be a bit of an ass. Especially in the manga, it's kind of more toned down in the film. So when Tetsuo unlocks his psychic abilities, it quickly goes to his head, and his jealousy turns to rage against his former friends, resulting in the final confrontation between him and Kaneda. This fight, more than anything else in the movie, is probably something you at least seen referenced in other media. But it's also a perfect example of the amount of detail the animators put into this movie, and one of the reasons, along with the plot, I still love it. Akira has recently been re-released in 4K and looks better than ever. So if you haven't seen this film yet, now is the perfect time. For today's drink, I wanted to base it on our protagonist Kaneda. And like him, I wanted it to be strong, in your face, and well, red. This is also a variation on the Boulevardier, which is a Bourbon Vermouth cocktail, except in this case, I've added some Fireball whiskey that gives it an extra kick. So you're gonna take a mixing glass and add 3/4 of an ounce or 22.5 milliliters of a Blanco Vermouth. Next, 1 ounce or 30 milliliters of bourbon. I'd recommend you use a bourbon like Maker's Mark 46 that has a little more character to it so it can stand out. And then 1/2 ounce or 15 milliliters of Fireball whiskey. This will add some spicy cinnamon notes to the drink. Lastly, add 3/4 of an ounce or 22.5 milliliters of Campari. This is a pretty bitter aperitif. Add some ice and stir for about 30 to 40 seconds. Then strain this into a coupe. And then for garnish, I'm going to use a lemon peel. And there you have the Kaneda. Cheers. Yeah, definitely an interesting variation on the Boulevardier. I would say if you do not like bitter drinks, you might want to scale back the Campari, because this is very bitter, but the ingredients here make it so it doesn't taste exactly like a regular Boulevardier. And that's for a few reasons. First, in a regular Boulevardier, you use sweet vermouth as opposed to Blanco Vermouth. This is gonna be a little bit different in terms of how the flavor is gonna turn out. Secondly, this isn't a standard Maker's Mark bourbon. It has a little bit more complexity to it. And lastly, you get those spicy notes from the Fireball whiskey. And I'd say if you want a little spicier, you could definitely scale that Fireball up. But overall, I'd say this is pretty well balanced. If I ordered a Boulevardier and they gave me this, I would definitely notice something was different, but I wouldn't be able to put my finger on what they did to change it. And honestly, I kind of prefer this version over the standard Boulevardier. It honestly took me a long time to kind of get used to Campari because I don't like bitter drinks, but after you make enough of them, you kind of start to develop your palate and you can stomach them a lot more. And this one I feel like is actually even a little less bitter than the standard Boulevardier. We spent some time talking about Akira and made the Kaneda, a variation on the Boulevardier. If you like this video and want to see more, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. If you have any other cocktails from your favorite series or games you'd like me to make, let me know in the comments below. If you want to see what I make outside this channel, follow me on Twitter at Mr. Spacelion or Instagram at Mr.Spacelion. But thank you so much for stopping by the Lions Lounge. I'm Mike, and I hope to see you next time.